Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, you might notice that we are back in the motherland of Scotland. I'm filming in my dad's study once again, which is kind of where we did many reviews a good few years ago. But nice to be home, and over the next wee while we're going to be reviewing some really nice Scottish, English, Welsh and Irish beers among a few other things. So you can look forward to that, and we are of course getting close to a very special time for the channel, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But yeah, for today's first Scottish review, I guess we could say, we're going to have a little look at a beer from a brewery that was featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last few years. They're still a relatively new addition to the Scottish beer scene, but they have built a very, very good reputation for themselves in that short time. They're probably still best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but they have been expanding and trying a few different styles over the last wee while, which has been interesting to see. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases. It's a style that I have tried from them before, but one I believe that we've never reviewed on the channel from them before. So this should be really quite interesting. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head a little bit west of me to Glasgow. We're going to go to Yoker to be precise, and that means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from the wonderful Overtone Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called King of the Bongo. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is an Imperial Smoothie Sour, and this one is brewed with mango, guava, papaya and coconut, so it should be quite nice. This one actually caught my eye because of the name, because it just made me laugh, to be honest with you. It reminded me of a very stupid comment that was made by a certain Boris Johnson, and I just thought, you know, King of the Bongo, I just thought it was really funny, to be honest with you, but it also sounded like a very nice beer, and I am a huge fan of the smoothie sour style category, mainly thanks to Elm11 Brewing Company, who are just outside of Malmö over in Skåne in Sweden. So yeah, this one I just felt would be a very good place to start off. And like I said, it's my first smoothie sour that I'm reviewing from Overtone on the channel as well. So let's crack on with this then and see what it's all about. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Overtone Brewing Company before, and we will absolutely add more to this list over the next little while. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your home town, state, county, whatever you like. If I reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Scottish playlist along with many other things, and that will of course be getting added to quite intensively over the next little while. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Overtone Brewing Company once again. So, Overtone Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Glasgow, Yoker to be precise, and the company was founded back in 2017 by Bo Wang, who is originally from Beijing in China. But he'd been a home brewer for many years before he founded the brewery, and the name Overtone actually comes from his love of techno music. So Bo hired Dan Miller to come in as his head brewer. He's from New Hampshire in New England in the northeastern US, and he previously worked as a head chef but also as a brewer in England, New York and also in Scotland for 6 Degrees North, who do some very nice Belgian style beers. But also involved in the brewing side of things is Martin Connaughton, who is a local, and he'd worked in the craft beer scene down in New Zealand for a number of years. He takes part in the brewing, of course, and does a number of other things around the brewery. But these days, Charlie Irving is also involved in the brewing side, and he comes from a background in home brewing and previously worked for another local brewery in Glasgow. But the brewery itself can be found in the New Albion Industrial Estate in Yoker near Renfrew and Clydebank. My grandparents were from there, but they began operations at this brewery back in 2018. They don't have a fixed range of beers, but they're always brewing different things. And they were the first brewery in Scotland really to focus on the New England hazy IPAs, and of course they've got a very good reputation on the back of that. But over the years, they've continued to expand the brewery infrastructure. They open the brewery up every so often for like a tap room and things like that as well, from what I understand. And as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced just over 160 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. Like I said to you, they are mainly New England hazy IPAs, but there are a number of other things in there as well. A good number of sours these days, quite a few Imperial stouts, and they've been doing a few lagers in recent times as well, which have been quite interesting. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Overtone Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn a bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and actually have a look at the beer itself. So I'll just have a wee look at the artwork on the can here. You can see it is pretty typical compared to what we've seen from Overtone Brewing before. You can see the label's been a bit rubbed around there. You can see that on the back as well, but I'm sure the beer will be absolutely fine. It's a 448ml can. You can see plain silver top on it there. I actually forget how much I paid for this one. I think it was like £6.50 or something like that. So that's going to be in the region of about €8, about 80 Swedish kroner, and somewhere in the region like $9 American or something like that. But for an 8% Imperial Smoothie Sour, I think that's pretty decent. But as I said to you earlier on, this one is called King of the Bongo, and it's done with mango, guava, papaya and coconut, and this was released at the very end of June 2023. I don't think this is a re-release. I think this is the very first time they've done this one, but yeah, I just thought it sounded really good, and it was a good place to start with reviewing some sour beers from Overtone. What I will say about this though is that when you actually hold the can, you can feel this thing is dense as fuck. It's really quite a heavy beer, this one. So yeah, and I'm not surprised. It seems to be. I'm surprised this one, just from reading the ingredients, it doesn't have oats in it. We'll need to see how it kind of turns out. It's got wheat and barley malt in it, this, but let's get it out into the glass and see what it's all about. So like I said, King of the Bongo, an 8% Imperial Smoothie Sour from Overtone Brewing in Yoker in Glasgow. Let's see what this is all about. Oof. Look at this thing. Just look at that. That is thick as fuck. Damn. It looks good. Well, that's not even all of it in the glass, but I think this will be enough to have a look at the thing. And this is weird because there's lots of carbonation sticking to the side of the glass, even though I washed it just before we started the video. So yeah, interesting. But aye, you can see the colour of that. That's pretty incredible, I have to say. So yeah, you can smell the fruit on that as well. It looks lovely, actually. I don't know if you can, how well you guys can see that on the camera there, but just look at that head. Really, very, very bubbly. I've never seen a head quite like that, actually. So yeah, as you can see, the beer's poured this almost, flesh colour. It's not a million miles away from the colour of my skin, actually. So I think, yeah, calling this like a flesh colour is certainly not out of the question. The carbonation from the edge of the glass seems to have calmed down a wee bit, but I've never ever seen a beer this colour before. This is just like, it's almost like a peach colour, actually. But yeah, this is quite interesting. As you can see, there's a bit of carbonation sticking to this side of the glass for some reason. I'm not 100% sure why, but yeah, other than that, a few big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, gradually going up toward the surface of the beer. But yeah, the head on this one is it's really quite strange, actually. I've never seen a beer come out of the can and behave quite like this. But you can see this thing is basically at 100% opacity level. There's no doubt in my mind about that. That is quite crazy, actually. But yeah, it looks lovely. Remember, the colour of your beer will, of course, depend on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect the colour of the beer too. And when it comes to smoothie sours, yeah, it is mainly going to be the type of adjuncts used that will affect the colour of this one. So a lot of the colour, it's guava, these ones, the mango, the guava and the papaya, they're all quite light fruits, so I'm not surprised that this is the kind of colour you get from this one, to be honest with you. Although with the flavour, I always describe guava as being like a very ripe and very green mango almost. So yeah, I would have expected maybe, I don't know, maybe a little bit more colour to it than this. But anyway, it looks very nice. You can see little bits of coconut, little tiny coconut particles floating around in this one. This beer is more like a suspension than a proper liquid, I would say. But yeah, appearance-wise, it is very interesting. Like I say, there's virtually, as I say, I really don't know how well you guys are going to see that, but you can see these kind of weird bubble things on the surface there. So the beer doesn't really have a head, actually. It's just got these weird kind of creamy bubble things. It's almost like aero bubbles in the chocolate, actually, so that's very interesting. But I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of that beer, to be honest with you. I think we can have a wee look at the nose and see what it gives us. So let's do this. Sugar it up and see what we get. And just look at the lacing and stuff it's leaving on the edge of that glass there. Crazy. Now, aroma-wise, it's actually very mild. It's not jumping out of the glass at you. Yeah, aroma-wise, this one's very, very kind of mild. I mean, you can. The thing that jumps out at the glass most for me is the guava. You know, for me, guava's always been a very, very pungent fruit, and you get that right away out of this one. So you get that really kind of sharp green guava coming out of this beer, which is quite interesting. But other than that, you're getting what you'd expect. And as I've said with these sour beers, these kind of modern sour beers before, they're not the most quirky and unusual in terms of their aroma and flavour profiles, but a lot of them are quite remarkably simple beers in a sense. They give you what you'd expect, but if they're done well, they're beautiful to drink. And they can be, like this one I guess will be at 8%, they cover their alcohol very well, so they can be pretty damn dangerous. So yeah. But yeah, aroma-wise, for me, the backbone of the beer, you can, if you really search for it, you get a little bit of kind of white bread crust. You can find like a really, you can get a good little bit of like a fluffy white bread coming out of it too. But it's more, as I say, it's kind of more. The thing that's strange for me about this one is that it doesn't give you that kind of yogurty note, but I'm wondering if that's because it doesn't state on the label that there's oats in this one. The ones that give you those more kind of yogurty, petit filou type aromas and flavours, they tend to be the ones that have a bit of oat in the malt base. So I wonder if that's what could be going on with this particular beer, because it does really smell more kind of bready, and it is, when you sugar it up a little bit, you get even more of the fruity character coming out of this one. So yeah, it's just a little bit of bread crust, a little bit of white bread, some nice kind of creamy oaty character as well, and yeah, the aroma is really, really quite nice in this one. So yeah, I think that goes together very, very well. Yeah, aroma-wise, it's quite interesting. There's not too much to report on the malty side of things. I think we'll get a bit more complexity out of that in the actual flavour, if you like. Now, it doesn't say. It also says on this beer that there's no hops added into it, and this is one of the things with these modern sour beers. There is a bit of a debate among brewers as to whether you need to use hops in these beers. Some brewers, such as Vault City and Holy Goat, like to use it because they say it gives you a bit of an added depth to the beer, whereas over in Sweden, for example, the likes of Duck Pond, Elma Livin, Fermenterna and stuff like that, they don't add the hops into the beer because they say it takes away from the bitterness. And back in the day, what they used to do with the Flanders Reds and the Huizes and stuff like this was they added old hops into it because they gave you the kind of depth of the flavour, but they didn't give you the bitterness that would detract from the kind of sour side of the beer. But this one, regardless, you always still get a little bit of a kind of grassy placebo effect out of these beers, and there's a wee bit of that in this one. Like, there is a teeny tiny little bit of like a floral aromatic sort of thing going on with this beer, and also some of the kind of grassy things too. But yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really nice in that sense. When you sugar the beer up as well, you start to get more and more of the the kind of softer papaya and mango out of the beer, because when you let it settle, I think you're getting the sharper guava really pushing its way out of this one. Now, for me, the coconut really doesn't come across as being overly prominent either. Like I say, when you sugar this beer up, you'll get more and more of the soft guava and papaya, the more soft mango and papaya out of this one. But then as you let it settle, you can feel that the guava, the sharpness and the greenness, if you like, as I would call it, of the guava, really starts to push its way out. So the way that goes together, I think, is really quite interesting in this beer. So that gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah. So aroma-wise, this one's really, it's quite simple and straightforward in some ways, but you are still going to enjoy this one, actually. There's not too much else I think we can say about the aroma in this beer. So what we'll do is we'll just put the rest of it into the glass. We'll give it a wee second to settle, I guess. No real sediment visible at the bottom of that can. And we'll have a taste of this one. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time for us to taste this one. I remember from in the pub when we were pouring beers like this, and they would be, you know, when you got to the end, you'd be waiting for ages for the thing to pour, actually. So yeah, seems to be like kind of what's similar. What's going on with this beer. But yeah, let's taste this one and see what it's all about. This is the King of the Bongo, a tropical smoothie, Imperial Sour. Imperial Smoothie Sour, I should say. 8% ABV from Overtone Brewing Company in Yoker in Glasgow. Mango, guava, papaya and coconut. Let's try this one. My first sour beer review from these guys. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, I have to say, it's pretty nice. It's very, I mean, when they say smoothie sour, they're no joking. They really are not joking with this one. It is literally like a kind of, it's almost like you're drinking like tropical fruit yogurt, this beer, to be honest with you. It's very, very nice, don't get me wrong. But you would drink this and wonder, is that really a beer, honestly? But still, tastes great. And yeah, I will say, the other thing I would say about this one is that on the, when you first take this in, playing with the light a little bit, when you first take this beer in, it's kind of like, it doesn't show you too much flavour. But once your palate kind of adjusts to it, and you kind of get into the particular part of the flavour spectrum that you should be at with this beer, it starts to show you a little bit more complexity. That's one of the things. And as I said earlier, quite often these big smoothie sour beers are really quite straightforward in some ways, but they just taste great. And this beer kind of is just like that. So kind of shows you Overtone are capable when it comes to these big smoothie sour beers, but this is definitely the most unusual pour I've seen in a while, and it's definitely the most kind of unusual beer for me when I think about, from my point of reference, when I think about Overtone Brewing Company. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. I really like this one. So yeah. Yeah, so where do we start with this beer then? We'll start in the middle third of the palate, as we often do. So the backbone of this beer, you've got a lovely, you have a lovely little touch of a very slight bread crust, smattering a, you know, fresh hedgehog white bread in there. You get a little bit of that. Above that, as you go a little bit further up in the layers, you get a little bit of a kind of fluffy white bread. But generally speaking, that middle third of your palate, it's really like a kind of oat milk, sort of yogurty type consistency you're getting out of this one. It almost has a very slight kind of It almost has a very slight vanilla flavour to it, which is quite interesting. And it's, yeah, it almost, yeah, as I say, it almost just has a very slight vanilla element to it as well, which is, it just gives you this, this beer really reminds me of the kind of apricot munch bunch yogurts that my mum would put in my lunchbox when I was a wee boy at school. You know, that's what this one really reminds me of. It's like that in beer form, a little bit less kind of yogurty, if you like. It really is very much like that. Yeah, it is just like kind of drinking one of those. So like I say, you've got this big sort of yogurty mass in the middle third of your palate there. As you go into the very dead centre of your palate, you do get a little bit of this almost like Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of flavour out of it, just in that little circle there. That's quite common with a beer of such high alcohol content, actually. So yeah, that's definitely something to think about with. Yeah, that's definitely something to think about with this particular beer. It really gives you quite a lot of these kind of lovely just yogurty flavours, but there's a little bit of sweetness there in the dead centre of the palate, and that of course will be helping to kind of cover up the alcohol that this beer quite obviously has. The coconut is kind of interesting. I don't get too much coconut in this beer. You can feel it just behind at the front of that middle third of your palate. You can feel a little bit of the coconut just coming further and further out with this one, and that just comes out further into the aftertaste. But yeah, the middle third of your palate in this beer is remarkably simple and straightforward, to be honest with you. I don't think we need to say much more about that. So let's go on to the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there, which is nice, and then you feel again you've got similar layers there. As I've always said, the back third of the palate will give you similar flavours to the middle third, but they just come out in different intensities, and you tend to have more sweet flavours coming out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours coming out further back. So you've got a nice little bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of backbone with this beer. On top of that, you have a little bit of a more on top of that, you've got a wee bit of a more kind of, you know, fluffy white bread, but then above that you get that big sort of yogurty, creamy, oat milky type mass, and you can feel that there. It feels a little bit lighter and more airy, but that definitely sits on top of the other two layers on the back third of the palate. But you can definitely feel on that back third of your palate the flavour is absolutely taller than it is definitely taller than you would get with the it's definitely taller than on the middle third of the palate. So yeah, above everything else, you maybe get a little touch of you maybe get a wee touch of a sort of kind of yeasty character out of this one. It's maybe just a very slight, more bready kind of character there, but you can certainly feel that above everything else on the back third of the palate. But I don't think there's anything else really to say about that. It's got a little bit of a farmhousey, woody, brown bready character to it. But yeah, definitely you can feel on the back third of the palate the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But as I say, it is very, very nice. On the hoppy side of things then, or the green component as I would like to call it, like I said earlier, this beer doesn't really have it, but you do still have a little touch of a kind of placebo green effect on this one. So in the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's a little touch herbal, and then as you push toward the kind of front corners of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of floral, aromatic sort of thing going on with this one. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is quite nice. But as I say, the side of the palate, the reason you can tell there's no hops in this beer is because the sides of your palate are very, very smooth. But yeah, as I say, a little bit of earthiness, a little bit of herbal character, then just a teeny little bit of placebo floral note, and round the front curve of your tongue, a very light, kind of grassy character too. So yeah, I really like how this one goes together. But yeah, it sounds, how am I saying it sounds? It tastes very, very nice, this beer. So yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of things then with this beer. So we'll take that front third of your palate. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a sort of bready build up in there. So a little bit of bread crust, white bread, and then yeah, you get this kind of yogurty, oaty, creamy note above that. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more. You've got a little bit of bread crust in there, and you've got a wee bit of the kind of white bread, but then you get that smooth, kind of yogurty, milky character, and the fruity notes just kind of sit on top of that. So yeah, this one's quite simple to describe. I think the mango and the papaya are kind of forming the base of the fruit. So the mango, I think, is a bit juicier and comes out further back, whereas the papaya sits on top of that yogurty layer and comes out a little bit more further forward. But then the guava sits on top of it, and that kind of sharper, more ripe flavour that you'd expect of the guava really comes out in this one. That really kind of sits on top, I would say. And yeah, the beer, they call it a smoothie sour. It's not really all that sour at all, to be honest with you. You've got a little bit of an impact sourness behind the kind of front tip of your tongue. It's got a wee touch of tartness to it, but really it's more kind of just fruity and juicy, just a very slight touch of sour character to it. But I think it's really nice. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the same level of sourness that you get from, the impact flavour of this one. This kind of sourness you get in the impact is kind of similar to what you get from, like, hummus or something like that. But it's a very, very nice beer, this one, actually, and it gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. The fruity side of it's great. I think the further into the aftertaste you go, you get more of these kind of yogurty type flavours out of it. And you get a little bit, it's got a kind of almost oat milk, can't say that word. It's got a little bit of kind of oat milky type vibe to it, I would say. But the fruit, it's a lovely beer, this one. I wouldn't hesitate to drink this again, but at 8% ABV, this one's a wee bit dangerous, actually. It's very, very easy to drink, but I think really, really nicely done. So, yeah. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Let's round off this review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. I think unquestionably this beer is full-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got this big yogurty, creamy sort of mouthfeel that we've described many, many times throughout the review. But in terms of its IBUs, I think it's fair to say this one is absolutely it's zero IBUs. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But on the brew sheet it'll be 0. It could be like 5 IBUs at the absolute most, something like that. But yeah, you can feel there's a little bit of a kind of malty backbone to this one. The malty character has a wee bit of dryness and graininess underneath, but really it's very smooth and very, very creamy. Actually, there's a little bit of sweetness in the dead centre of your palate, which will be covering the 8% alcohol, which is to be expected. And then the fruity side of things is obviously very, very tropical. You get a bit of dry coconut in the aftertaste too, but yeah, the tropical fruity side of things is great. And yeah, it has a wee bit of sharpness from the guava when you first take it in, but mainly it's a lot of smooth, kind of juicy character from the mangoes and the papayas, I would say. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This has been a really nice beer to try, my first sour beer review from Overtone Brewing Company as well, but we do have quite a few IPAs, and I think we've got 1 or 2 stouts to look at from these guys during this time that I'm home too. So yeah, you can look forward to those over the next few weeks. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Overtone Brewing Company as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again in the very near future. But this one was the King of the Bongo, a tropical Imperial smoothie sour, 8% ABV with mango, guava, papaya and coconut in it, from Overtone in Yoker, just outside of Glasgow, here in Scotland. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys on the next review.